We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Pod Maverick After Dark, another off-season edition because we're still in literal hell, particularly if you're living in Texas, where it was like 111 gajillion degrees today. I'm Kirk Henderson, joined as always by Josh Bowe. What's going on, Josh?
Oh, yeah, nothing. We're just trying to survive our casual 112 heat index days. You know,
It's a bit much, man. It's really something. Like, you go out there.
How are you acclimated? You're now a couple of years from East Coast life, so
okay. I mean, it's you really just got to be careful with that window from like 1 to about 4 o'clock, because like you can go out there at 10 and it's okay. You can go out there at noon and it's like, all right, this sucks, and then all of a sudden at like 1 to 2, it's like, this is horrible. Well, let's see. It's this morning when I put out a call for a mailbag question, which was seemed like a good idea at the time. Then we have one of these deals where we get at least some news adjacent items to talk about. So we're going to start with those, and then we're going to lead into the questions. So next week. So is it next week? Let's see. It's Saturday. Oh. Yeah, it's Saturday here. Goran Dragic, one of the most famous Slovenian basketball players, who announced his retirement basically last December, but he'd been kind of on the way out of the league for a year or so. Is having like a going away game in Slovenia, and it's a charity or there's a charity gala dinner the night before on Friday, which is the 23rd. Sponsored by his foundation. And then there are a lot of NBA guys going to play, which I thought was interesting, including 3 Maverick adjacent folks. Obviously, Luka Doncic, who was his teammate for that incredible 2017 run. Dirk Nowitzki is going, which I found fascinating. I don't understand how he's like, they can't possibly expect Dirk to play. Dirk can't walk anymore. And then Steve Nash, Bojan Bogdanovic is going to be there. Nikola Jokic, Luis Scola, Rasho Nesterovic, and his old teammate Chris Bosh is going to go, along with Jimmy Butler was supposed to come, according to one website that I'm looking at here, but he had to go. He had to change plans because he's in China. So I expect there to be some other names that NBA super fans are familiar with. But I don't know. I think it's kind of a I just love this as a concept. I like old players getting together and doing stuff. And Goran Dragic is like a Maverick who never was in many respects, yeah. Where the Dallas just consistently found a way to not get him. Really loved watching him play for several years. Just a true psychopath out on the floor. and I can see how he and Luka really did get along. And it will really be the first time I think we've sort of publicly heard anything from Luka since the Slovenian national team failed to qualify for the Olympics.
Yeah. So it'll be cool. It'll be cool to see. It'll be fun. I think the Bosch part of it is probably the coolest part of it, considering his career got cut short because of what was it like
he had
blood
clots, and it was like very smart of him to stop playing.
Yeah, of course.
And there's a little bit of mixed information as to whether he's playing or not, which I find fascinating. But I sort of suspect he'll play because it's probably it's not like it's gonna be a real game. It's gonna be an all-star game, guys going out and having fun and messing around. Like it's that sort of thing. So it's pretty fascinating to me. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know how I'm gonna try to find a way to watch it. I have no idea how, through probably my illegal streaming service, whichever way I can do it. I'm just hopeful that it's televised somewhere. Anybody in Europe or in Slovenia, get at me with what channel it might be on in Slovenia, because I can probably find that channel. What was the next thing that I said was news related?
We've got that. I think we got two more. We either want to do the Stein practice story or the Jason
let me do the Stein practice story, because that one's not really a story. It's just as you said beforehand, NBA players doing NBA things. But Mark Stein reported earlier today that several Mavericks are together in Los Angeles working out, including Kyrie Irving, who is not yet cleared to practice, and Klay Thompson as well, who is not yet cleared to practice. I didn't see any other names, but you like to see Mavericks, Mavericks playing together. Like I just, there's the story that you're going to talk about here, like in terms of Jason Kidd mentioning how Kyrie Irving is responsible for a big part responsible for Klay Thompson joining the Mavericks. I just think it's like guys getting together, being social and being friends off the court. I think you gotta like your coworkers, man. And I like it is all.
No, yeah, it's cool. And yeah, it kind of segues nicely into Jason Kidd being on a podcast today, with Klay being out there in Los Angeles with Kyrie and the rest of some of the Mavericks teammates. Segues nicely into what Jason Kidd said on a podcast today, the Dubs Talk podcast, which I'm going to be honest, I'm not familiar on what that podcast is, but I assume it's a Warriors related podcast, which Jason Kidd, being from the Bay Area, I guess makes sense why he was on it. So he told them that Kyrie was very influential in getting Klay to agree to come to Dallas. So quoting from the story, Jordan Brodus of our site Aggregated on MavsMoneyball.com, you can go there and read it right now. The quote he pulled from that podcast was Kidd saying, "I'd love to say it was all me being Kidd, but it wasn't. It was a team effort. But I think player to player in this league, they all talk about their situations and they all recruit one another. This was about Kai and Klay being able to talk. If you all remember, Kyrie and Thompson were on the 2016 Olympics team. Obviously, they had lots of battles in the NBA Finals between the Cavs and the Warriors. So they are, well acquainted with each other. And I don't think it's surprising that Kyrie was kind of like the lead recruiter. And I think you mentioned in our Slack that the bigger story from this is that the Mavericks actually have, for the first time ever, an American-born kind of all-star, near all-NBA caliber player, which is pretty much required if you want to recruit other American-born all-star capable caliber players. Mavericks basically since 1998, their franchise has been run by two foreign-born players, which is awesome. And it's awesome that they've had Dirk and they transitioned that basically right into Luka. But, foreign-born players it's harder for them to do that recruiting stuff because they don't play on national teams together. They didn't grow up playing AAU or college together. Like the relationships are just different. And that's not to say players don't like Luka or didn't like Dirk. It's just different. So having Kyrie, who's been on Olympic teams, who's been on all-star teams, who's shared locker rooms with these guys, been on AAU teams, although I guess Kyrie's getting a little older now, so I don't know how many AAU teammates he still has in the league. Still a few, but not that many left. But it just helps.
He's part of the broader basketball culture of America. I mean, he shows up at these different, these different professional runs and sometimes plays, sometimes doesn't. He's a guy on the streets. And, as much as I appreciate guys like Jokic and Luka just wanting to go home, there's just something to it where you get a guy out there, this is just sort of human nature. Like you see someone, you shake their hand, you want to chat with them, talk with them. And Dirk just never really wanted to do that even when he lived here. I'm sure I doubt he ever really had a serious conversation because some of these guys, particularly, 15, 20 years ago, didn't feel comfortable doing this sort of thing. And now it's just it's a different environment. I mean, people change teams. There's obviously a sense of loyalty, but it's different. And I'm really pleased to see it because it was one of those things I rolled my eyes at before Kyrie Irving joined the team, and I was wrong to do so. And it's been pretty fucking important for the rise of this team, just as much as Nico Harrison figuring out and the Mavericks getting all of their books and stuff in order. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, for sure.
So, but it's cool.
Well, now we're going to head on to, one more thing that just sort of dawned on me before we go to the mailbag here is I want to give a shout out to my man Mavs Reddit and to the Garcia kid and anybody else that had anything to do with that Dallas Mavericks. I'm sorry, the Mavs Twitter tournament. Let's just be honest here. When I'm a 40-year-old man, and when I see the words basketball tournament, let's all get together and hang out, my first thought was, really? Just because it's like everybody acts a little goofy on the internet, right? Everybody, it's just sort of nature thing. So it's like, all right, let's get a bunch of people that kind of know each other from behind screens. Maybe haven't really talked to each other that much. And my first thought was like, okay, this is going to be weird, but I like weird. And so I go, my wife had something to do that day. I took both my kids, which was, let me just tell you, everybody, shout out to everybody for being patient with me for bringing my fucking children because I'm a weirdo. But it was really fun. It was in a really small gym that the Mavericks themselves had redone in Dallas. And it was, there were like 8 teams playing 3-on-3, I think. And it was very fun to watch really intense basketball.
Yeah, it looks like everyone took it very seriously, which is great. I like that. I'm competitive. That's how
but it was serious without anybody being an asshole.
That's rare. You know what I mean? Basketball.
Yeah, like it was great. Like I watched probably 6 games, and like you could tell people were getting competitive and getting a little chippy, but nobody blew up. Nobody got hurt. It was very fun to watch and hang out. And they had gosh, I can't remember the guy's name just because I'm brain dead tonight. But there were some folks doing commentary for the internet, and if you're watching on the streams, tapping in and out, it was very fun. Like I just gotta say, like they did a great job. I think they're gonna try to do something again next year. A bunch of people are asking me, like, Kirk, why aren't you playing? And it's like, guys, like if I play and get hurt, my life is over. My wife will end me. She already has very little patience for me doing this sort of stuff. But that said, like watching it, it was the kind of intensity of basketball where you watch it and you want to join. Like it makes you want to play.
That's great.
And that's kind of the highest compliment I think I could give these guys. And it was very, I was talking with buddy Tim Cato, and he was just like, man, this is really like, I'm out of shape. And I'm sitting and I'm trying to give Tim and all these guys credit. It's not a matter of being in shape. Because I know I talked to you about Olympic 3-on-3 basketball and how everybody kind of was disappointed in it in the United States. You're basically sprinting 12 to 15 feet over and over and over and over again. Like it's not full court basketball where you're running up the floor. You maybe get 5 or 6 seconds to pause. If you take like that was how the teams that won. If you took your foot off the gas for a second, you were getting scored on. And so that was that. I don't know. I'm talking
a lot more ground to cover in 3-on-3.
That's right. That's right.
There's more space.
I watched Noah from the Smoking Cuban play some really good ball. Everybody that played, particularly like the Mavs people that I knew, were really fun to watch. Really fun to watch. It was great. I watched Slightly Biased get a game winner by sort of just rolling up the middle and getting an offensive tip in, and he would like just
that's my game too.
Yeah, and like just like the slump of being like, oh, I'm so tired. It was over. It was great. I watched Tim Cato give a little left. He was on the left wing. He drove with his left hand, got like bumped, and then did up and under and finished. It was great. It was great. And Sarah asked in the chat, what was the talent level in general of Mavs fans? Like everybody showed up to play. Like I play probably 3-4 times a year when I get sucked back into it because I'm still in pretty good shape. But then I remember almost immediately why I don't play, because it's like, oh, my body knows what to do. My body can't do it. Like it's like, oh, I'm gonna jump for this rebound, and then I barely jumped like the height of a phone book, and that's where I would die. Anyway, I was really I really enjoyed it. I again, it's like these things like this, it's kind of like, it made me think of my high school reunion where it's like a bunch of people like, oh, I'm not going to go to that. And then you go, you have a great time.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is what you make of it. They're going to do it again next year. I look forward to going. Yeah. Anyway, actually, you know what?
Fun. I think my only comment is, I'm sad I missed it. I was solo parenting with a double ear infection toddler this weekend. Unbeknownst, we found out after the weekend, but she's fine now. She's sleeping. I'm way, I don't think I've played an organized basketball game since 2015, so I'm obviously way out of shape. But I think, if they do this again next year and it works around, that'd be fun to do. Like, I miss the competitiveness. Like, I'm very competitive person. And like I miss kind of that outlet. I kind of use some other things to get that out of me.
Yep.
Because if you don't, I go nuts. Yep. So I would love to do that. I don't think if I rolled up there this weekend, I think I would have gotten extremely embarrassed. But now that if there's some time, I would love to do it. I love all the people that were participating in it. Reddit Mavericks is so good at like getting the community together for stuff.
Oh, he's such a happy guy, man.
I always appreciate when he does stuff. Always good to see all the people that are there. Too many to name, but everyone that was there are all, good people, and it'd be fun to see. So I got a year to prepare. So let's see what I can.
Josh puts on the Rocky IV training montage and is just really fighting.
Yeah,
it's a man. I took like one bad step today at the gym, and I'm like,
your knees are betraying.
Yeah, they really are, it's so annoying. Okay, so we're at about 15 minutes. I'm just going to do an ad insertion real quick, and then we'll get to the mailbag. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. When Josh and I are back in the regular season, we're going to cook like gas. The last month or so, we always kind of run into a point where we both sort of question our commitment to this. Not like basketball, but just sort of like what we do here for Mavs Moneyball and for Pod Maverick. And I am finally kind of over a particular hump that I was just staring at. I'm really looking forward to basketball getting back here in about another month plus. We'll be doing these shows a little more regularly when there's more stuff to talk about. And then, as Tyron asked earlier, when am I going to have another live show? I don't know. I want to have one. I need to get back on my horse and be doing it again. But, there just hasn't been as much to talk about. So we'll see where we go from here. If you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast stream. We really appreciate your support. Leave a comment on the actual video after the fact. If you're listening on an audio stream, please, shoot me an email if you have questions. Leave a review on the podcast. Love those sorts of things. And we're going to insert some audio ads here, and Josh and I will be right back.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-new Prologue EV, there's a lot that can impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Okay, we're back. As always, the people who ask questions, I am kind of eternally grateful for, because I think about the Mavericks a lot, but sometimes my brain just doesn't work. So the one that I want to go to first was from the Garcia kid, and he asks pretty simply, like, where do we think the Mavericks stack up in the Western Conference? Like, where do you place them? And I've been thinking about it all day.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
I mean, they're pretty clearly in the top 4. And I think where people will disagree is who you would rank within that top 4, because the top 4 feels like, in some order, OKC, Dallas, Minnesota, Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, OKC's offseason was great. The Mavericks offseason, I think, was pretty objectively great as well. I would say maybe second, probably maybe 2, because I feel pretty, I can't back down on the Minnesota thing. Like, I still feel confident that the Mavericks kind of have that matchup.
Yep.
I don't think anything's changed until Anthony Edwards kind of takes that next step as like an offensive fulcrum. The Mavericks are pretty comfortable ahead of them. Denver is difficult. I love the Nuggets, but I think they've taken too many steps back, and they're going to be relying on too many young guys this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Mavericks, I would put the Mavericks over them, and then probably OKC 1. But this is more like, where would I rank them, like, to finish in the standings?
Yeah, let's go. I mean, OKC I like both. Yeah.
Okay. If I do the standings, I think I would do 1 OKC, 2 Dallas, 3 Minnesota. 3. No, I think I have 3 Denver, 4 Minnesota, maybe somewhere around there. I wouldn't be surprised if Dallas finished lower, because we just can't really trust them to play a complete regular season.
Well, never really. We've not done like a deep schedule analysis, but just because I sort of feel like it's not that it's been overdone, but everybody else did kind of the podcast earlier. The schedule released last week. The Mavericks have a pretty brutal November, October, November to start the season. And, the classic Mavericks, start stumbling, bumbling, rumbling down the court type thing. I could see it, but on paper, I am with you. Who did the Minnesota Timberwolves draft? This is going to irritate the life out of me.
The Kentucky point guard,
Rob Dillingham. Rob Dillingham, and I'd completely forgot about him until I was having this discussion this morning. So it was a really interesting thread of like looking at different statistical performances of the top 10 guards in the NBA. I saw this thread out there, and like the one that really, it was, Luka ended up being the best, yada, yada, whatever. But the part that stood out to me that I was most interested in was just how friggin' inefficient Anthony Edwards actually is. And he takes a lot of like, oh no, kind of shots.
Yeah, that team wins with defense. Their offense is mediocre.
And I don't know a ton about Dillingham, but Dillingham strikes me as the kind of spicy guard that they need to run the offense. Like, I don't think Anthony Edwards is more in the mold of Devin Booker and a scoring guard who can pass than a passing guard who likes to score. And I think that we're going to continue to see an evolution of Anthony Edwards, but I think the Mavericks still have their number this year. Like you said, I can't believe I'm going to go as high as 2. I was really thinking sort of 3-4 most of the day, but
I think Denver taking the step back with KCP gone, and I think you're a little worried about, their bench. They didn't really. I mean, KCP gone, and they didn't really add anyone. Like,
no,
their big. What is it? Russell Westbrook, I think, is the biggest off-season move.
I mean, Luke Burns says, he's kind of questioning Oklahoma City, and I'll tell you, I actually think Oklahoma City cleared up their problems. Like, their roster makes me want to throw up. It's so good. I do understand what you're saying about having another playmaking guard in Giddey, but Giddey was their weak link for the playoffs, and I think Luke's comment has to do with the regular season. But Alex Caruso brings a lot. Isaiah Hartenstein brings a lot. They're just gonna be more, and it really makes me sick at how good they're gonna be.
Yeah, and then being a younger team helps with the regular season stuff. Like last season, they were relatively injury free, and
that comes with youth.
Yeah, and you don't have as many rest nights on back to backs when you've got a younger team. I think they take the regular season a little bit more seriously because it kind of feels like I don't know.
Well, they won the regular season anyways. They were first in the West.
Yeah. There's something about the more veteran teams kind of know how to pace themselves a little bit better in the regular season. So that might lead a stretch where they go, 5-8 for 13 games.
Yep.
But then they get it back around. So it's kind of weird. I actually think, I would say OKC will probably win the regular season, but I think, knock on wood, how everything's looking right now, if I had to pick them in a playoff series, I think I would still pick Dallas, although it would probably be 7 games. And I think it would be closer. I know last season was 6 games and it was still pretty close, but I think the Mavericks, outside of a couple of games, handled themselves in that series pretty well. So I think I would still pick Dallas in a playoff series right now. Give me a couple of weeks of seeing what freaking Caruso does to that team, and I might change my mind. But that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Caruso, he's just.
I know he's your white whale.
He's just such a valuable player to teams that need cohesion. I mean, he doesn't shoot enough, but then again, Shea should probably shoot more. Anyways, all right. So we're both kind of as high as talent wise, second in the West is what we see, which is going to drive some people crazy, I think. But for me, they have to finish top 4. How's that?
Yes. Yeah, that has to be the ultimate goal. They just have to do it. They can't have one of these seasons where they start their 500 in February and they kind of have to dig themselves out of a hole, which they're pretty good at, but they just can't keep doing that.
Yep. All right. Which question did you like next that you think we ought to go forth?
I've got a couple up here. Do you want legit or do you want funny?
Let's go legit first, and we'll get towards the goofier stuff in the end.
I can't pronounce usernames, but he's been a longtime follower of the site and a longtime follower of, I think, both of us. But Pros Francis on Twitter at PRAS Francis, Pros Francis says, what changes would you like to see to Luka's off-season training regimen to be more prepared for the early season long playoff runs? This is a loaded question for you. I know because
that's a good question, because I think if you're being honest, the only thing I would like to see him improve going into this year is his free throw shooting on the basketball court, because I don't see how I can ask for anything else from him on the basketball court.
Yeah, I know.
Being more prepared for the early season and a long playoff run. Luka's 2 long playoff runs have coincided with him getting hurt both times. I don't see how you train against that. He plays a certain way, and I think you just have to hope for the best.
Yeah, I think this goes back to, we talked about this, and I'm going to try to write this week. It goes back to, I don't know if it's something, obviously he needs to keep focusing on cardio, keep trying to be in the best shape that he can be. But I think the ultimate answer lies back to, they have to find a way to keep his usage rate down so that that limits opportunities for him to get injured, because he plays such a physical style that's not going to change regardless of how well in shape he is. And if you give a guy a 35, 36 usage for 80 games, and then you ask him he has to do that again in the playoffs, it's no surprise that he keeps finding himself looking a little ragged at the end of seasons, because he basically has a workload that's asked of him that almost no other NBA player realistically sustains. Again, we talked about it last year. It's you're basically asking for LeBron level fitness to get through that workload, and LeBron is basically a one-of-one human. I don't think there's a level of fitness Luka can reach that handles the workload that he's been asked of up until right now. And I think they finally got a roster in place that they can kind of wean off of this Luka heavy burden with Klay. I know Klay Thompson isn't necessarily he's not going to be running pick and rolls, but you can do stuff with him off ball where Luka isn't running 8 pick and rolls every 30 possession, he's running a billion pick and rolls every 5 minutes. You can let Luka kind of hang out, let Klay do some off ball stuff, let Kyrie run more pick and roll. more stuff like that. I think they get, he's never going to be a usage player like in the high 20s. Like he's probably always going to be 30, above 30. But if they can get him down to consistently like 30, 31 instead of 34, 35, 36, I think that makes a difference in the playoffs in terms of his fitness.
Well, so my friend Adam Matas of DNVR and of All Cities Network said something on a podcast the other day that's just been living in my brain. And it's something that I knew, but I don't think I'd ever heard it described this way. And he said, when you really think about basketball, even though it's 5-on-5, you're either seeing, 3-man action, 2-man action, or 1-on-1. That's almost all basketball plays or those sorts of things. What the Mavericks, in my opinion, need to do is include more actions with Luka where he doesn't have the ball, because they run a lot of stuff where he'll just go stand somewhere. And like, that's not Luka's terrifies defenses when he's on the move. And so I would like to see more of that. And I don't really,
that come back to, it's because he finally doesn't have the ball because he has to use the ball all the time that he wants to take a break. Like you could probably coax him into more off-ball movement if he's not being asked to do everything on offense for 90% of the games. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things. I don't know. Like the Leo in the chat says, I hope that he keeps working on his catch and shoot. Luka shot, I think, 100 more catch and shoot threes.
Much better last season.
And he was good at them. Like Luka's 3-point shooting became such a weapon before he hurt his knee that it was like, what are teams going to do about him? So I don't know. Like there's asking for Luka skill improvements feels like, like it's like, huh? I don't really know what I'm going to do there. Okay. Let me see if there's one that I like next. So we got a lot of goofy questions. I don't really have, there's so many. Oh, this is a great one. This is from Mariah. It's Marius at MARIUSS, then 3 H's. He says, why does international basketball feel more competitive and meaningful than the NBA? Why does it feel like most young NBA players are just in it to grab the bag? Why does the NBA as a product? What does the NBA as a product must change to be more appealing? Why are watching games live is torture with all the advertising, timeouts, etc. So I want to work backwards on this one, because this one it rang my bell earlier this morning, and I just thought, it's a little. Brian Windhorst made some very interesting comments related to the Paris Olympics about how he was like very irritated that it wasn't monetized correctly. Like you could it's just like one of the most American things I've ever heard him say, where he's just like, he's like, there's no merch anywhere. I can't buy anything. This is very frustrating for me. I want to get something for my kid. And I just can't help but wonder. And now keep in mind, guys, I don't know a ton about the economics of European basketball. Okay. But I do know that NBA players make a ton of money. They make a ton of money because of the advertising, because live sports in America is one of the most sought at, American demographics are the most sought after things in like Western Hemisphere stuff in terms of live product advertisement. So these guys make a ton of money. And now to work my way backwards about the question of what, why does it feel like most young NBA players are in it to get the bag? I don't necessarily think that's fair, but the path is there for almost all of these players to make money that goes beyond generational wealth. I mean, Luka Doncic is going to eclipse Dirk's career earnings by the end of his first contract, if he hasn't already. I mean, I've not done the math. Like, he might already be there. I mean, the money is just astounding.
I mean, role players are making more with 4-year contracts than like almost Michael Jordan made for like his entire career.
It's crazy. So it's like, I don't necessarily think they're in it for the bag, but then this gets to the question, which I find very compelling. Why does international basketball feel more competitive and meaningful than the NBA? The answer to that question, quite simply, is volume of games. There are so many NBA games, which is how these guys make all this money, that the game itself ends up being a little bit devalued, which is why the NBA has come up with all these gimmicks to try to make the games seem more interesting. They're gimmicks. Like the in-season tournament is a gimmick. Playoffs for what we do in America is very different than a lot of these European tournaments, which are one and done affairs and results in some of these debates that we see between, who's world champion, Olympic champion, yada, yada, yada. I will say that when it comes to the NBA, I truly feel that the series of 7-game series results in the best team winning more often than not. So you get a lot going on there, but these international tournaments and even a lot of European play in general, I think feels more meaningful because there are fewer opportunities to play. Like to get to the Olympics, once you're in the Olympics, guys, so you're one of the 12 qualified teams. Not only you don't have to win all 6. You have to get out of your group play, make it into the final 8. Then you have to win 3 games. Those 3 games, though, are so pressure packed because if you lose, you're done. Like there's no going anywhere. So it's like that to me is why these games feel more intense than most NBA games. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I've been on the, I would love for the NBA season to be cut down to where each team is playing. And this will never happen because Pandora's box is open, the genie's out of the bottle, whatever analogy you want to use, cliche you want to use, because the money is just, they're not going to go back. Like, there's no way you can go back now. Like the money's too good. People don't go back money wise. I would love if like the NBA season was like each team played like 2 games a week or something like that, kind of resembling like the college basketball conference schedule, where like when I was covering college basketball at Texas Arlington, and that's kind of small time, but they basically played like every Wednesday, every Saturday, and some type of schedule like that. So one, it helps TV viewing because it's like appointment viewing, and you know when a game is coming on every week, kind of like the NFL. That Sunday and Monday, and now Thursday and some other games, but that helps with that, and then it just helps routine. You get practice time, you get days off, you get built-in rest days. Like the fact that the NBA plays, like the fact that there's even any 4 and 5 nights or 3 and 5 nights and back-to-backs, like it's impossible to play a schedule without having that, or the season lasts 12 months. So you have to compress 82 games into these schedule parts where teams are just like, we're not going to try this week because we want our players to be upright by the end of it. And I know there's a lot of, well, what about back in the 80s? They weren't doing this.
The style of play, like go watch an 80s basketball game. These guys run up and down the floor a lot. There is no movement in that offense. And then they're all within 15 feet of the basket. They just cover a lot more ground now.
Right.
And
so it's just impossible.
Otherwise is lying.
So I would love it for that. More scouting would make these games be great, but they're never going to do that. So the other thing about it though is also, just the pride, the country, like, these, especially for a lot of the non-American teams where it's just like, wow, I'm from a country of a few million and we're here on this national stage and I can do something that's never been done before. Like the South Sudan team that's been chronicled, really cool. And what Luol Deng is doing with them. Like that's something you cannot compare that to Charlotte and Atlanta playing on a back-to-back in February. Like the stakes are just way different. In addition to, we didn't even talk about the international rules, which that might make for a more competitive environment too. I know a lot of people want FIBA rules for the NBA, especially with officiating.
The rim touch stuff is awesome.
I like it's so much cleaner.
And it also embraces the athleticism of the game. Yeah. So that's one that I like. All right, what's the next one you think we should answer?
Do you want serious or funny?
Your call.
Let's do funny because this one made me laugh and I want to kind of get yelled at on the internet.
Sure.
Dalton Richard at Dalton Richard 17, who I think follows both of us and has interacted with us online a bunch of times.
Oh yeah.
Very kind of weird comparison for 2 fast food chains. Like I would never think.
I don't know what one of these is. I'm gonna get yelled at for that.
Oh, you don't know? Well, you haven't been back in Texas long enough. It's okay. He just basically pick one, Taco Casa or Chick-fil-A. And it's very funny because I would just never kind of place those two. And Taco Casa, Kirk is, I'm
looking at it. This looks like the kind of garbage I would eat.
Yes.
This looks awful. I can't wait.
I'm gonna go on the record. Give me Taco Casa over Chick-fil-A. I want those shitty tacos, man. There's something about them. The burritos are good. I like my Tex-Mex. I like my tacos. And I'm gonna be honest, and I'm gonna get run off the internet. I think Chick-fil-A is a little overrated. Like I don't think it's bad. I think there's enough chicken sandwiches out there, fast food chicken sandwiches, that I wouldn't feel okay losing Chick-fil-A in my life. Like I would go, and I know that there's also a lot of other taco places. I don't know. Just that Taco Casa taco, it's so shitty in a way that really appeals to my inner demon, like inner trash monster, my inner lizard brain. They put a lot of cheese in it, which I appreciate. Like, and again, like there's so many good, like, there's so many like local taco joints that are obviously like more authentic and way better and that are good. But I like Taco Casa. Like just give me like, they got a big freaking, like you give me the one big freaking taco that they have. I don't even need more than that. And it's just good. I'm good.
So I grew up until I was 12, Kansas City, Missouri. And there's this taco place there. And I sent you the menu over Slack. It's called In a Tub. Okay. Now, if you were to Google In a Tub's tacos, like a picture of the tacos, they deep fry the taco after constructing it. But then the key part is that they use powdered cheese. So basically what goes in mac and cheese, that's the stuff on top. And it is so gnarly and so awesome.
Sounds like a war crime, but I would eat it.
Yes. And that's what we're here for. We're here
for Midwest. That's the one thing, I don't think you know this. I went to
that's right. You went to Kansas.
My first 2 years of college, I went to Kansas, KU, go Jayhawks, and they're kind of my college team. Because my other college doesn't have a football team. Oh, camera's gone. I'll bring it back.
It's all right.
So they're kind of my college team. Football team's on the rise, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, so I was there for my freshman and sophomore year, so I was there a lot. And I like my second year, I was basically living there almost all time. I came home a lot my freshman year. My sophomore year, I didn't come home a lot. Going from Texas to the true Midwest, and like I didn't realize how much I would miss just Tex-Mex like I did, because it exists up there, and I know you know this, but it's different.
Yep.
And it's so different that even like the Taco Bells tasted different.
Sure, no, I went to college in California, and like really like all like Mexican food influences out there, and my kind of were more seafood based. You get to like New Mexico, there's a lot of stuff that's like potato based. It's very like the different food and like the way it gets changed in different regions is always very interesting to me. All right, we'll circle back on more ridiculous questions. I like this one because this one I missed earlier. Sam at Saminsky says, which backup guard, Grimes, Exum, or Hardy, do you think will end up getting the most run? Will any of them have a breakout year and be a six-man type of guy? I don't think anyone ends up being a six-man type of guy, but all three of these guys are on 1 year deals. 1 year deals. If or the last year of their contract, however you want to phrase it. I don't know, man. What's your initial inclination?
You're going to ask me who's going to be the most impactful to the Mavericks of those three. Quentin Grimes. He sort of feels like he was really good in New York. And I feel like he's kind of been the low-key offseason move. And obviously smart NBA people have been talking about it. So I don't want to act like we're unearthing some stone. We're not breaking news by saying Quentin Grimes is a really good pickup for the Mavericks. But he was so good. Like, for a rookie player and a young player to earn Tom Thibodeau's trust so quickly, like his defense is legitimate in a way that, like, if you look at the way the Mavericks play defense, even last season with their hellacious defense, it was less about how great their perimeter defenders were and more about like the system and the athleticism, and then having basically the two best rim protectors in the NBA at post All-Star break, Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Like, Grimes might be their best individual perimeter defender they've had in the Luka era. Is that being a little? Am I being a little too ridiculous there? Am I discounting Derek Jones Jr. a little bit too much there? He's also very, 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 very good. But like Grimes, individual defensive ability as a perimeter guard is just something they haven't had too much. And when you saw it with Derek Jones Jr. last year, like he was so good for them because they didn't need a lot. They just needed a little bit. And I think Grimes has that. Plus, he has basically the shooting volume of a Tim Hardaway Jr. and the accuracy. Like they just haven't had that they haven't had that combination of player.
So we're talking. We're gonna get a. So would you consider Grimes a 2 or a 3?
2.
Okay. So walk with me through this exercise together. The Dallas Mavericks have the potential to put out a lineup featuring point guard X. Doesn't matter who. Just pick a point guard. Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, who is a dog on defense, Maxi Kleber, and Derek Lively. Like, that's a lineup you could go to if you were really feeling defensively frustrated with the Mavericks. Like,
or even swap in PJ for Maxi.
Okay, sure.
Either way, because I know people are going to yell at you about Maxi, but
that's fine. No, but I mean, Maxi drives me crazy. But Maxi as a weak side and help defender was quite excellent until Exum decided to try to get him to reenact Kevin Bacon's dunk in the air up there, and he nearly died. Like what? Like they were cooking with something up until that point. Maxi drives me nuts, but Maxi's a 10-minute a game player. That's all, that's all. He's whatever. But I just like that's defenders. Like the Mavericks having defenders is wild. That's all.
Yeah, for sure.
We've not talked near enough on our stream about Najee Marshall, and like listening to the Pelicans people talk about him, they're just like, yes, this guy is it. And we just don't do that from the Mavericks because we hate all more players by the time they leave. I don't know. That's a good one. It's a good one. Do you have any more? Because I got one more that I would like to do.
I think I want to, unless it's one of the ones I'm looking at. I think I have 2.
Sure, let's go.
But let's go with, and this is kind of playing off of what you talked about, but friend of the show, Josh Eberly, who does a bunch of Hoop Mag, NBA Canada, Sport News, big following on Twitter, NBA media guy, who's a Mavericks fan from Canada. So he's been a big follower of us and supporter of us since he's a Mavericks fan. Levels of belief in Hardy versus Roddy B and Dojo, of course, referring to Roderick Bobois and Dominique Jones, the young guards the Mavericks had back around the 2010-2011 era that they drafted in the first round. I thought this was very interesting just because I like reminiscing about that era of Mavericks basketball because, obviously very formative. I mean, really for both of us, that time, the prime Dirk years, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was funny. And I don't know if this is hot. Obviously, Hardy has versus Dominique Jones, like tremendous. Like he tremendously. You could say what you want about Hardy. He's already had a better NBA career than Dominique Jones.
Yeah, for
sure. Dominique Jones was kind of a flash in the pan that did like maybe one cool thing every 20 days, and you'd be like, oh, I can kind of see it. But like Hardy had moments in the NBA Finals. Like he's already had a better NBA career. Now Roddy is interesting because you could also probably argue that Hardy has already had a better NBA career than Roddy B. But I would probably argue that before Roddy's foot injury in the summer of 2010, after they lost in the playoffs to the Spurs and before they started the regular season where they won the title, he was on pace to probably have a really good NBA career. And then he had that foot injury and it never came came back from it. Like obviously his rookie season dwarfed Hardy's by a lot. But Hardy probably is going to have the longevity because Roddy's career ended so quickly because he never got over that foot injury. Yeah, so that was interesting to me. Like, who would you rather have, like in their prime? Because you never really saw Roddy's because he got hurt and he never got over it.
Yeah, and Bob Sturm of The Ticket wrote a book called "This Year Will Be Different," and it's about the Mavericks 2011 season. And there's a segment in it that I remember very clearly because Roddy Bobois played so much.
He was the opening night starter at the 2 guard.
And he played they just kept trying to make it happen. I don't remember anything about his season. I really don't at that point. Rick really gave him a lot of chances, but when it came down to it, the veterans of the team went to Rick at some point. It was before the playoffs.
Yeah, it was like the last week of the regular season or something.
Kind of said, like, you got to stop with this. Like, this isn't working. Like, he's not doing it for us, more or less. And they made the changes to the starting lineup. Rest is history, yada, yada. But obviously, Carlisle tinkered a lot with that lineup. But I don't know, man. That's a tough one for me. To me, where I sort of fall is shoot first small scoring guards are not my thing. And I don't want to have to care about them. And I don't want to have a take on them. You know, Kyrie Irving is a little bit of an exception because I still think Kyrie is a point guard over a shooting guard. I just think he is willing to play shooting guard. Does that make any sense?
No, that makes sense. I mean, Kyrie is an all NBA level offensive like creator. Like if you're going to be a small guard, you have to be like, hey, can you create offense and run offense? Not, you know, are you a 2 guard in a 1 guard's body? That's not Kyrie. Kyrie is a legitimate point guard.
Mm-hmm. So that's where I fall. That's where I fall in this.
I mean, I think even both of us, if we're not as high on Hardy as a lot of other people, like he's already blown past, like if you would have, you know, draft night, he was the 37th overall pick, second rounder. Like he's already done more than I expected because you don't really expect much from second rounders. Like,
well, and Luke Byrne
his
in
playoff
the comments,
legitimately like nice.
I mean, he like won them. I don't think he won them games, but like he gave them shots in the arm at times when it was required, which I just never would have admitted that. But at the same time, I think a lot of what he did was almost him playing against the type. Like the teams were willing to let him do what he did. Like that, like on the scouting report, Hardy was like, okay, if Hardy scores, then we're gonna lose. Like that's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the roster, he is expendable.
Yeah,
he's a luxury.
And Luke Byrne says how Kidd manages Hardy this season will be interesting since it's a contract season for him. And it's just like I think they have to get out from under him, to be quite honest. Like they don't need him. and like what sort of offer is he looking for? Like I hate to talk contracts right now with a team like this, but it's just we saw this with Josh Green. Like they offered Josh Green a contract, and then I couldn't believe they got out from under Josh Green the way they did. So I don't know. I think I had one more that I liked. So Tyler Edsel, who is going to be one of the newer contributors to Mavs Moneyball, once I can get everybody onboarded, says, where do the center minute distributions fall next year? Will Lively keep pushing up closer to 30 minutes, somewhere to a 24-24 split with him and Gafford, Cleaver and Powell sneaking in any minutes? I think you have to almost say on paper, you need to get Lively as close to 30 as you can, but you understand that because you have Daniel Gafford, you just play them. You play who works in a given night. That's what I think Kidd does.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. They got to get him close to 30. They got to push him to that number so he's consistently on the court more. I think they have to start him to start the well. They don't have to, but I think he's going to start the season because I mean he was so good. He was so good as a rookie. Like he is the future of the team. Like it's him and Luka. Like Kyrie and Klay are on the wrong side of 30. Like if you're talking about who's still on this roster in 5 to 6 years, theoretically it's Luka and Lively. Like,
that's right.
They might be the only two. You know, maybe Grimes, maybe PJ. You know, maybe some other guys. They're still fairly young, but like those are the building blocks of your team. And I think if you had to say who are the 2 best players on the team, Kyrie is still that number 2, but like Lively is making a case in terms of just impacting winning. And I don't want Kyrie fan people to get mad at me because Kyrie's been really good for the Mavericks, but like it has to be Lively's position. Like it would be really awkward to me for Lively to keep coming off the bench when he is just as great as he is. And like, not to diminish Gafford, but like he's already shown a broader game than Gafford's as young as he is. Well, nothing wrong with Gafford, but like it's kind of Lively's position. Like he needs to. I agree. To give him the reins. You know.
Well, and Lively missed due to injury. Lively actually missed a number of games, and I think because of how he plays, that is always going to be a risk. So it's quite wonderful to have a borderline starter hanging out in Gafford. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, what else? Anything else you want to answer?
Do you want to do one more from new staffer Kate?
Sure.
Because I thought this was interesting, or just because like I'm sure that there are other Mavs fans that have this kind of thought, and I think we can get there because definitely we have been on the cynical side of the basketball takes for sure. She says, thinking about how other teams improved and got briefly panic stricken because what are the chances that Klay can't provide what Dallas is relying on him to provide? What if the gelling period takes longer than expected? Could they be, I'll just say, screwed? It's going to be great, right? Right? And I understand that. Like, I understand thinking that. And I think it's healthy to have kind of that skepticism in the back of your head to kind of question things, because I think that helps manage your internal expectations a bit more, and it leads to less disappointment in certain ways. And I get it. Like, there is a scenario where it's like, hey, they're taking too long to incorporate Klay. Klay at times looked rough last season with Golden State, going from the starters to the bench and back and forth. Like, does he still have it? Like, I kind of get all those concerns, and like that could happen. Like, that is definitely a scenario within the realm of possibilities. I think to kind of ease that thought and not worry about it is, I think, one of the things that's easy about fitting in, like, if you can shoot, it makes so much easier in terms of fitting into a new spot. Like, the thing I always think back to is like how long it took the LeBron Miami Heat to fit together, because all three of those stars, like, none of them were considered great shooters. Like, even Chris Bosh, like Wade, LeBron, those were not 3-point gunners. Like, Klay and Kyrie can shoot. So if worst case scenario, like if Luka ball takes over or if there's too much one-on-one play, like, there are not, like, Klay spotting up in the corner is not the worst thing in the world. Like, him not getting a ton of touches doesn't necessarily.
No, and
it's not a bad thing, because like they've got the right kind of archetype of players to fill these roles.
And one thing Jason Kidd knows, as a person who's been to the finals repeatedly now, both as a coach and as a player, is he knows it's way more important where you finish than where you start. And I actually think that the Mavericks get off to a bit of a bumpy start with these sort of narrative-based questions. I don't think Klay fits seamlessly. I do think that we are openly questioning his role. But as long as the Mavericks are winning more than they're losing, it ultimately doesn't matter. We've talked about all the different combinations during the summer about what the Mavericks could and couldn't do. Just earlier in this podcast, I threw out a defensive lineup that didn't feature any of the stars at all. Just got, like, the Mavericks are so multiple in what they can do that Kidd has a very different challenge than what he's had in years past. Instead of figuring out how to make things work with what he has in terms of less than ideal pieces, he has to figure out how to keep everybody happy. And I think he'll take that challenge and figure it out. I really, really do. So I get the question, I get the trepidation, but this is, you made a comment almost like a year ago that I think about a lot, that the Denver Nuggets title was the culmination of their run. It was not the beginning, it was the end. And so far you've looked rather prescient about that, because Denver's looked very cooked. And then you look at what Denver had did in the previous years. You mentioned the fact, like, that bubble team probably could have won the title if they would have slipped past LA.
Yeah.
And it's, sometimes you just need moments. And I think there's an argument to be made that the Mavericks have continued to try to seize the moment in front of them by the pieces that they've added. And, if Klay doesn't work out, if Klay becomes a head case, let's just be honest, they'll backburner him. They will. They have the options to do that. And
his contract's not that bad.
His contract's not that bad.
Movable. Yeah.
And they have guys who could play in his spot. And so what I think we'll see, just because the season is so friggin' long, is that at all points, these guys are going to have slumps and bumps, and Kidd's going to mix and match and work their way through it. And then hopefully they'll come out having won 55 to 60 games and be in a great place for the playoffs.
Yeah. Well said. Don't know if I even have much to disagree with that. Yeah, I think the key thing you're hitting on, the optionality that Kidd has with the roster, just didn't exist. Even last season's team, which obviously was the most talented Luka Doncic team has ever been post trade deadline. Like not even close compared to those previous, even the 2022 team. You just, apples and oranges almost, like that comparison. Like they kind of added more, like, because you think about what went out and what came in. Tim Hardaway, in terms of like players that legitimately played last season, players out, Tim Hardaway, Derek Jones, Josh Green, players in, Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes. I don't think you can make a hard argument that each player replacing the one that left is a better player than he's like. I think no one's going to argue Klay Thompson, even right now, even at his age, is a better player than Tim Hardaway Jr.
Right.
Najee Marshall from Derek Jones to Najee Marshall. I think most people would argue maybe like same tier. I personally think Najee's a better all-around NBA player than Derek Jones Jr.
But I don't
think anyone would say is a down, that's not a major downgrade.
I mean, I'm living in this place where I keep thinking about the vertical spacing Derek Jones Jr. provided, but friend of the show, Bobby Corrala, I was talking with him about this, and he's like, they didn't run any plays for Derek Jones Jr. Like the verticality that came from Derek Jones Jr. as a result of them pushing on fast breaks. And he's like, do you think they're going to not push on fast breaks because they don't have the vertical threat? I'm like, they should still push. So I worry. I'm kind of worried about the things that aren't even there.
Yeah. And then Josh Green to Quentin Grimes, to me, that's a no doubter upgrade in terms of what the Mavericks needed from that role. Not trying to say one player is definitively better than the other, but it's just what they need from the minutes Josh Green gave them. He wasn't that type of player yet. And I think Quentin Grimes could, because he's already proved it multiple seasons. Like they need that guard coming off the bench needs to be perimeter defending, hit threes. Green was more kind of havoc, chaos, passing, which, they've got Luka, they've got Kyrie, they've got enough passing already. They just need some quality production, consistent production. And I think Grimes fits that role a little bit better. So, and I mean, after the trade deadline, they pretty much rampaged to the end of the season. So, yeah, I mean, everything on paper, they should be a better team than last season. And to me, it's only injuries and age for some of their more important players that could really derail things. So.
Yep. Okay, that's it. I think I'm going to go hang out and
talk an hour in the middle of August.
Pretty good. Thanks for the questions, guys. Really appreciate it. We got a lot more we didn't even get to, which I may hold on to for next week. So we'll see.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, guys. Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. We are at Mavs Moneyball as well as here at Pod Maverick. We thank you so much for your support. I don't know when we're going to ramp back up the writing. I got to look at the schedule and figure out when stuff is happening. But football is on the horizon, and then basketball kind of creeps up right behind it. With the Mavericks kicking off some of these games, pretty much exactly what we predicted. We didn't even talk schedule stuff, so maybe we do that next week. Who knows? Thanks so much for hanging out. We will talk to you guys soon, and go Mavs.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.